child vanishes. Hours pass. Search teams flood the area. Then suddenly, the child is found alive, but their words don't match the trail. Records are sealed. Interviews disappear. Details are rewritten. What really happened during those missing hours? Why do official files leave so much unexplained? And how many answers were never meant to surface? Early records of brief absences. In January 2019, a 3-year-old boy named Casey Hathaway disappeared from his great-grandmother's yard near Ernle, North Carolina. The property bordered a wooded area and a shallow drainage ditch. Family members reported that he had been playing outside with other children before moving out of sight. Local deputies began a search within hours. Volunteers, search dogs, and thermal drones were deployed. Rain and near-freezing temperatures affected the area during the first night. After nearly 3 days, a woman walking her dogs heard a faint voice calling for help. Searchers followed the sound and found Casey tangled in thorn bushes in waist-deep water. He had minor scrapes and bruises but no major injuries. When emergency workers examined him, he appeared dehydrated and tired. He was transported to Carolina East Medical Center for observation. During brief media interviews, family members stated that Casey said he had slept with a bear. Law enforcement did not release a transcript of the interview. The statement was repeated in local and national news coverage within hours. Later reports emphasized that no animal tracks were found near the site, and that the child may have referred to a blanket or to surrounding brush. Similar records appear in 19th century newspapers. An August 1883 article from Idaho describes the disappearance of an 18-month-old boy named James Vaughn. According to the report, his mother was working near her home when she noticed he was missing. Neighbors and local ranch workers organized a search. Large animal tracks were reportedly found near the property. The group followed the tracks several miles into nearby terrain. The following morning, the child was found sitting on a grassy patch approximately 4 miles from his home. He was described as unharmed and alert. The newspaper attributed the child's movement to a bear based on the tracks and on the distance covered. No direct quotation from the child was included. The article did not describe medical examination, interview methods, or follow-up questioning. The record moved directly from disappearance to recovery to explanation. Later reprints shortened the account further, keeping only the distance traveled and the presence of animal tracks. In July 1955, a 2-year-old girl named Ida Mae Curtis went missing near a family campsite in northwestern Montana. The area was part of a logging operation where several families were spending the holiday. According to newspaper coverage, Ida Mae and her older brother were walking near the camp when a bear appeared. Witnesses claimed the animal picked up the child and ran into nearby trees. Search parties were organized immediately. Weather conditions deteriorated overnight, with rain and falling temperatures. The next day, searchers located Ida Mae across a creek roughly 300 yards from the campsite. She was lying beneath branches and cedar debris. Reports stated that the branches were too heavy for her to have placed alone. Medical staff examined her and found no puncture wounds or claw marks. She showed signs of fatigue but no severe injury. Journalists focused on the shelter-like structure where she was found. No direct statement from the child was published. Adult witnesses' descriptions became the primary narrative source. Another report from 1888 centers on a 2.5-year-old girl named Edith Davis in the Catskill Mountains of New York. Her father, Miller Davis, told reporters that she wandered from their rural home while he was working nearby. He searched through the night and contacted neighbors at dawn. A fisherman several miles away found the child standing in a shallow creek and brought her to safety. According to the article, when asked where she had slept, Edith replied that she had slept with a big bear. The statement was printed without further context. No description of the questioning process was provided. There was no indication of whether multiple questions were asked or whether alternative answers were offered. Later newspaper digests repeated only the sentence about the bear and omitted other details of the search. An earlier account from 1868 describes the disappearance of a 3-year-old girl named Katie Flynn near Walhalla, Michigan. Her father, Henry Flynn, worked in a lumber camp. Katie often played near logging paths. One afternoon, she did not return. Searchers noticed her footprints alongside large animal tracks leading toward a river. The group followed the trail into wooded terrain. Late the next day, searchers reported hearing a faint cry. As they approached, they claimed to see a large, dark animal enter the water and swim away. They found Katie nearby. The newspaper included several sentences attributed to her. She reportedly said that a big black thing stayed with her, brought her berries, and covered her with leaves. She also said that a big dog took one of her shoes. The language shifted between thing, dog, and bear, depending on who was speaking. Across these cases, a similar structure appears in public records. A young child disappears briefly in a rural or forested area. Search efforts involve neighbors, volunteers, and sometimes organized rescue teams. The child is located alive after hours or days. The physical condition is described in basic terms such as unharmed, scratched, or exhausted. A short statement attributed to the child is published, often without explanation of how it was obtained. Older newspapers rarely preserved full interviews. Reporters summarized conversations and selected phrases that fit within column limits. Editors favored statements that could be easily understood by readers. In many cases, the surrounding dialogue, tone, and sequence of questions were not recorded. Modern cases often involve recorded interviews, but public releases usually include only brief quotations. Child development specialists note that very young children rely on familiar categories when describing unfamiliar experiences. Words such as bear, dog, or monster may reflect size, shape, or sound rather than precise identification. These linguistic limits are rarely addressed in early reports. Instead, the initial wording becomes fixed in later retellings. Medical documentation from these incidents is usually summarized rather than published in full. Hospital records, hydration levels, and psychological assessments are seldom available to the public. Search logs and GPS tracking data are also typically withheld. What remains accessible is a simplified timeline and a small number of quoted phrases. Documentation practices in early recovery files. Public records concerning brief child disappearances often begin with simple administrative entries. These include time of report, location last seen, weather conditions, and names of responding personnel. In many archived files, the first written material consists of dispatch logs and handwritten notes taken during initial response. These early documents prioritize coordination over narrative detail. They establish a timeline but do not preserve full conversations. When a child is located alive, responsibility shifts from search coordination to medical evaluation and preliminary questioning. This transition is reflected in the paperwork. Law enforcement reports, hospital intake forms, and emergency responder notes appear within hours of recovery. Each document is created for a specific purpose and follows a standardized format. Space for narrative description is usually limited. Interview material is commonly recorded in brief sections labeled statement, remarks, or subject history. In older records, this space may consist of only 2 or 3 lines. Officers and medical staff summarize what they believe is most relevant. These summaries are shaped by time pressure, institutional language, and assumptions about significance. They rarely include verbatim dialogue. Archival examples show that questioning often occurs in informal settings. Children may be asked questions in ambulances, patrol vehicles, hospital rooms, or family homes. These environments are not designed for structured interviews. Background noise, fatigue, and the presence of relatives influence how conversations unfold. Documentation from these settings reflects the conditions under which it was produced. Many reports contain indirect language. Phrases such as child stated, subject indicated, or according to family are common. These expressions signal that the writer is paraphrasing rather than quoting. The original wording is replaced by institutional phrasing that fits report templates. Over time, these paraphrases become treated as original statements. Medical records contribute another layer. Emergency department forms focus on vital signs, hydration, temperature, and visible injuries. A section titled History of Present Illness often includes a short description of where the child was found and how separation occurred. This section may include a sentence attributed to the child, but it is filtered through clinical priorities. Emotional tone, uncertainty, and pauses are excluded. In many files, the same event is described differently across documents. A police report may note that a child followed someone, while a hospital chart records that the child became separated. A social worker's note may describe wandering. Each version reflects professional vocabulary rather than the child's own terms. These differences are rarely reconciled in later summaries. During much of the 20th century, audio and video recording equipment was not routinely used in field interviews. Even when tape recorders became available, they were reserved for serious criminal investigations. Short-term disappearances without evidence of harm were typically handled through handwritten documentation. As a result, most early interactions exist only in summarized form. Institutional training materials from several decades emphasize efficiency. Officers are instructed to gather essential information quickly and restore family stability. Detailed narrative recording is not presented as a priority unless a crime is suspected. This guidance is reflected in archived files, where extensive description is absent. Editors and clerks also influence preservation. After cases are closed, files may be reorganized. Duplicate notes are removed. Informal papers may be discarded. Only standardized forms are retained. This process narrows the surviving record. Materials that do not fit official categories are lost. Media reporting further shapes what remains visible. Journalists rely on press releases and briefings prepared by agencies. These statements often extract one or two lines from internal documents. Once published, these lines circulate independently of their original context. Later reviews tend to cite published reports rather than primary files. Language used in records shows recurring patterns. Terms such as unharmed, good condition, and minor injuries appear frequently. These descriptors are broad and allow for administrative closure. They indicate that no further action is required. More detailed physical or psychological observations are uncommon. Psychological assessments, when conducted, are usually confidential. Only their existence is noted in public files. Outcomes are rarely disclosed. As a result, public documentation provides little insight into emotional or cognitive effects of short-term separation. Attention remains on physical status and logistical resolution. Retention policies vary by jurisdiction. Some agencies archive files indefinitely. Others destroy non-criminal records after set periods. Hospital systems maintain records under separate regulations. When law enforcement and medical files are governed by different retention schedules, materials disappear at different times. Complete sets rarely survive. Freedom of information requests provide partial access. Redactions remove personal details and sometimes entire sections. Interview material involving minors is frequently withheld. Researchers and journalists often receive only administrative portions of files. Narrative elements are among the first to be restricted. In some archived collections, marginal notes and corrections reveal internal uncertainty. Words are crossed out, descriptions are revised. These markings show that early interpretations were not fixed. However, later copies usually omit these traces. Clean versions replace working drafts. Translation between oral and written forms introduces simplification. Children often speak in fragments, gestures, and repetitions. Report writers convert this into complete sentences. This conversion removes ambiguity. What was originally tentative becomes definitive in written form. Cultural expectations also affect documentation. In rural or wilderness contexts, separation is often framed as environmental. In urban settings, it may be framed as supervision failure. These frames influence which details are recorded and which are ignored. The same statement may be interpreted differently depending on setting. Over decades, standardized reporting software replaced paper forms. Digital systems enforce field limits and drop-down categories. While these systems improve consistency, they further constrain narrative space. Officers select predefined options rather than writing descriptions. Free text sections remain short. Comparative review of records from different periods shows continuity and compression. Whether handwritten or digital, files reduce complex interactions to administrative units. The underlying logic remains constant. Documentation serves closure, accountability, and liability management more than historical preservation. Training programs for child interviewing have evolved. Modern guidelines recommend recorded, neutral, and open-ended questioning. However, implementation varies. Publicly accessible files suggest that many brief disappearance cases still rely on informal conversations and summarized notes. Professional boundaries shape content. Medical staff avoid investigative speculation. Police avoid psychological analysis. Social workers focus on family environment. Each profession records only what fits its mandate. No single document captures the full interaction. The resulting archive is fragmented. Pieces exist in separate systems, governed by different rules. When viewed individually, each appears complete. When viewed together, gaps become evident. Conversations are implied but not preserved. Decisions are documented without their deliberations. Over time, these condensed records become reference material. They are cited in reviews, reports, and secondary analyses. Their limitations are rarely acknowledged. The format itself gives an appearance of finality. The available documentation reflects institutional priorities rather than experiential detail. It preserves dates, locations, and outcomes. It minimizes uncertainty and ambiguity. It converts personal encounters into administrative artifacts. These patterns appear consistently in recovered child cases across regions and decades. They demonstrate how early interactions are transformed into stable records through standardization, editing, and attrition. Environmental records and measured recovery sites. When a missing child is located alive, official attention shifts toward documenting the physical surroundings of the recovery site. Law enforcement agencies, park services, and rescue organizations follow established procedures for recording terrain, distance, weather, and visible traces. These records form the environmental portion of the case file and are intended to support administrative review and future reference. The first step usually involves identifying the precise location. Coordinates are taken using handheld GPS devices or mapped against known landmarks. In older cases, distances were estimated using foot travel time, compass headings, or references to nearby roads and waterways. These measurements were written into field notebooks and later transferred into formal reports. Search teams commonly describe terrain in general terms. Words such as wooded, rocky, marshy, or steep appear frequently. These labels provide a functional overview but do not capture fine detail. Soil composition, vegetation density, and seasonal variation are rarely recorded unless they are directly relevant to navigation or safety. Distance from the last known location is treated as a central metric. Reports typically list mileage or approximate walking range. In wilderness settings, straight-line distance is often distinguished from travel distance. Some files include both, while others rely on estimates. In early 20th century cases, distance was sometimes expressed in hours of walking rather than miles. Clothing condition is another standard category. Officers and medical staff note whether garments are wet, torn, muddy, or missing. Shoes receive particular attention. Footwear status is often recorded because it relates to mobility and exposure. These observations are brief and factual. They are rarely accompanied by interpretation. Environmental temperature and weather are documented using available data. Modern reports reference nearby weather stations. Older files rely on descriptive terms such as cold night, heavy rain, or clear skies. These descriptions are usually drawn from responder observations rather than formal measurements. Photographs are taken in many recoveries, especially after the 1970s. Images typically show the child's location, surrounding vegetation, and nearby landmarks. These photographs are stored within departmental archives and are seldom released publicly. When released, they are often cropped or blurred to protect privacy. In cases involving wilderness or parkland, ranger services maintain separate documentation. These records include trail maps, elevation profiles, and search grids. Recovery sites are marked on operational maps. These markings are later archived but are rarely included in public summaries. Footprints and disturbed ground receive attention when visible. Searchers document impressions in soil, sand, snow, or mud. Measurements may include stride length, direction, and depth. In many instances, these details appear only in field notes and are omitted from final reports unless criminal activity is suspected. Vegetation disturbance is also noted. Broken branches, flattened grass, and displaced leaves may be photographed or described. Reports often use standardized language such as evidence of passage or disturbed foliage. These phrases indicate observation without assigning cause. Water features are carefully recorded. Creeks, drainage ditches, ponds, and culverts are identified by name or proximity. Depth and current are sometimes measured. These details relate to safety assessments and to explanations of movement patterns. Urban and suburban recoveries involve different documentation. Streets, fences, drainage systems, and abandoned structures are mapped. Surveillance camera coverage is noted when relevant. Blind spots and obstructions are sometimes marked in diagrams attached to reports. Recovery sites are usually secured briefly for documentation. Tape or temporary barriers may be placed while photographs and measurements are taken. This process is short in non-criminal cases. Once basic records are completed, the area is released. Clothing, backpacks, or personal items found nearby are logged separately. Their location is measured relative to fixed points. In many cases, these items remain with the family and are not retained as evidence. Documentation serves primarily to confirm their presence. Medical examiners or emergency physicians sometimes visit recovery sites in remote areas. When this occurs, additional environmental notes may be added regarding shelter, shade, or exposure risk. These entries are usually limited to 1 or 2 sentences. In older records, sketches were common. Officers drew rough maps showing paths, landmarks, and recovery positions. Some are highly precise, while others consist of simple arrows and labels. Later, digitization has preserved many of these drawings. Technological changes have altered documentation practices. Modern teams use GPS tracking, drone imagery, and digital mapping software. These tools generate large data sets. Only summaries of this material typically appear in final case reports. Raw data is stored separately or deleted according to retention rules. Time spent at the recovery site is also recorded. Reports may note how long searches remained to document conditions. This information relates to staffing and cost accounting. It is not intended for narrative reconstruction. In multi-agency searches, environmental records are divided among participants. Fire departments, volunteer groups, police units, and park services each maintain separate logs. These are later consolidated, often incompletely. Discrepancies between measurements may appear as a result. Comparative reviews show that similar terrain can be described differently by different responders. One report may call an area dense forest, while another describes the same location as lightly wooded. These variations reflect individual perception rather than objective classification. Environmental documentation tends to emphasize what is visible at the time of recovery. Earlier conditions are reconstructed only when search logs are available. Changes caused by weather, animals, or search activity are rarely distinguished from original conditions. Legal considerations also shape recording practices. Agencies document enough detail to demonstrate procedural compliance. Excessive interpretation is avoided. This approach reduces liability but limits explanatory depth. Public summaries derived from these records are highly condensed. They may mention only distance and general setting. Maps, photographs, and measurement tables are usually omitted. The public record therefore presents a simplified version of complex documentation. Retention policies again influence what survives. Digital images may be deleted after set periods. Paper maps may deteriorate. Some files retain full environmental documentation for decades, while others preserve only summary pages. Researchers examining archived material note recurring gaps. Elevation data is often missing. Soil conditions are inconsistently reported. Nighttime lighting conditions are seldom described. These omissions reflect operational priorities rather than oversight. Environmental records are designed to support search evaluation, training, and internal review. They are not structured for narrative clarity. Their format reflects institutional needs for accountability and procedural tracking. Chronologies built from dispatches and logs. Search operations begin with time-stamped entries. These appear first in emergency call records, radio transmissions, and dispatcher notes. Each entry marks a point in sequence rather than a narrative moment. Together, they form the temporal framework of a response. In archived files, These logs are often the most complete surviving documents. The initial report usually enters the system through a public emergency line or a park service communication channel. Dispatchers record the caller's name, location, and basic description of the situation. This information is entered into computer-aided dispatch systems or handwritten ledgers. Accuracy depends on clarity, signal quality, and the caller's emotional state. Corrections are added later when details change. Once a report is accepted, agencies assign response units. Patrol cars, rangers, firefighters, or search coordinators are dispatched. Their departure times are logged automatically or manually. Arrival times are recorded upon contact with supervisors. These timestamps establish the official beginning of organized activity. Early response periods are usually fragmented. Multiple units arrive independently. Each maintains its own log. Patrol officers document movements in notebooks. Rangers note patrol routes. Volunteer coordinators track arrivals on sign-in sheets. These parallel records are later merged into summary timelines. Command posts are established when searches extend beyond several hours. At these locations, staff maintain situation boards and activity charts. Updates are written at regular intervals. These boards display search sectors, assigned teams, weather changes, and operational goals. Photographs of boards sometimes appear in internal archives. Shift changes generate additional documentation. Outgoing supervisors prepare briefings for incoming staff. These include time of last contact, areas already covered, and pending tasks. Briefings may be oral, written, or both. Written versions are often short and rely on abbreviations. Volunteer involvement introduces further layers. Civilian participants sign in, receive instructions, and are assigned routes. Coordinators track their movements using paper maps or digital systems. Completion times are noted. These records help prevent duplication and ensure accountability. Search dogs and mounted units generate specialized logs. Handlers record start times, track lengths, and environmental conditions. These notes follow professional standards and are usually kept separately from general timelines. Only summary references appear in final reports. Air support, when used, produces flight logs. Helicopter and drone operators document launch times, flight paths, and landing times. These records are maintained by aviation units and later shared with Search Command. Public summaries rarely include detailed flight data. Weather changes are incorporated into timelines through updates from meteorological services or responder observations. Rain, temperature drops, and wind shifts are marked. These entries explain pauses or redirections in activity. They also influence later evaluations of response effectiveness. Rest periods and resource limitations are noted. Teams are rotated to prevent exhaustion. Meals and equipment checks appear in logs. These practical details demonstrate compliance with safety protocols. They also contribute to the overall duration of operations. When a child is located, discovery time is recorded immediately. The individual or team making contact reports the find through radio or phone. Dispatchers log the message. Supervisors confirm and update command staff. These entries are among the most precise in any timeline. Post-recovery activities also generate timestamps. Medical transport, family notification, and site documentation are entered sequentially. Case closure times appear in administrative systems. These mark the official end of active operations. In older cases, timeline reconstruction relied on handwritten records. Investigators later reviewed notebooks, call sheets, and newspaper reports to assemble sequences. Discrepancies were common. Memory and informal notes filled gaps. Some inconsistencies remain unresolved. Standardization increased in the late 20th century with digital dispatch systems. Automatic time recording reduced reliance on manual entry. However, human input still determines when events are marked as complete. Delays and omissions persist. Multi-agency operations complicate chronology. Police, fire services, park authorities, and volunteer groups maintain independent systems. Synchronizing these systems requires later reconciliation. Time zones, clock drift, and reporting delays affect accuracy. After-action reports summarize timelines. These documents present a cleaned version of events. Overlapping activities are arranged sequentially. Conflicting timestamps are adjusted. The goal is coherence rather than exhaustive detail. Legal and administrative reviews rely heavily on these summaries. Courts, oversight bodies, and insurance providers examine response speed and coordination. Timeline documents support institutional accountability. They are drafted with this audience in mind. Public communication follows a separate schedule. Press releases are issued at set intervals. Information is cleared through supervisors. Release times appear in media archives. These form a parallel chronology focused on public awareness rather than operational activity. Researchers comparing case files note that early hours receive the most detailed documentation. As searches extend, entries become more general. Fatigue, resource strain, and routine reduce precision. Later days are often summarized in blocks. Some records contain gaps. Radio failures, lost notebooks, and software errors interrupt continuity. In such cases, later reports rely on estimates. These are usually labeled as approximate. Not all approximations are clearly identified. Time pressure shapes recording behavior. Responders prioritize action over documentation during critical moments. Notes are written afterward. Retrospective entries may compress multiple activities into single lines. Training manuals emphasize the importance of accurate logging. They instruct personnel to record actions immediately. Compliance varies. Field conditions often override procedural ideals. Retention policies affect temporal records. Dispatch data may be stored for limited periods. Paper logs may deteriorate. Digital systems are updated, sometimes rendering old formats inaccessible. Long-term preservation is inconsistent. Comparative analysis shows that timelines rarely capture informal decision-making. Conversations between supervisors, spontaneous volunteer efforts, and ad hoc adjustments are underrepresented. Only formal actions appear. Despite limitations, chronological records provide structure. They allow agencies to evaluate response speed, coverage patterns, and coordination efficiency. They form the backbone of internal review. Initial testimonies from family and nearby observers. Reports of a missing child rely first on information provided by parents, relatives, and nearby witnesses. These early accounts establish the foundation for search, planning, and public alerts. They are recorded through emergency calls, in-person conversations, and written statements. The structure and depth of these accounts depend on institutional procedures and situational conditions. The first description usually enters official systems through dispatch services. Callers are guided through standardized questions covering last known location, clothing, physical traits, and recent activity. Responses are typed into digital systems or written in call logs. These entries are brief and designed for immediate response rather than detailed documentation. Responding officers or rangers conduct follow-up interviews at homes, campsites, trailheads, or command posts. These conversations take place in varied environments, including vehicles and temporary shelters. Noise, interruptions, and time pressure influence both questioning and note-taking. Statements are often summarized rather than transcribed. Early questioning focuses on sequence and timing. Investigators ask who last saw the child, what occurred immediately before separation, and how long the child was out of sight. Notes are recorded in notebooks or on standardized forms and later transferred into electronic databases. During this process, language is shortened and reorganized. Multiple versions of the same account frequently appear in case files. A parent may describe events differently to dispatchers, patrol officers, and supervisors. Each version reflects the phrasing of the questions asked. Minor discrepancies are common and are rarely reconciled unless they affect search direction. Accounts from non-family witnesses are also collected. Neighbors, hikers, campers, and passers-by may be interviewed briefly. Officers may write summaries afterward rather than during the conversation. Verbatim quotations are uncommon in non-criminal cases. Some files include short remarks from volunteers who assisted in early searches. These notes may describe where individuals were located at the time of notification or what prompted them to join. Such remarks provide limited contextual information but are not systematically gathered. Written statements are sometimes requested from guardians. These forms ask about daily routines, medical history, and supervision patterns. Space is provided for narrative description. Responses range from detailed accounts to short factual entries. Investigators rarely revise these statements for clarity. In earlier decades, formal written statements were less common. Handwritten notes served as the primary record. These notes reflect personal documentation styles. Some officers recorded extensive detail, while others focused only on essential facts. Variability remains visible in archival material. Media activity influences testimony. Families may repeat information in interviews with journalists. These public statements are later referenced in official summaries. Phrasing introduced in media settings can enter administrative records, blurring boundaries between formal and informal sources. Language differences introduce additional layers. Interpreters are used in multilingual contexts. Statements pass through translation before being documented. Public records seldom describe how interpretation was conducted or verified. Stress affects recall and expression. Parents and guardians are asked to reconstruct precise times and actions under pressure. Research on investigative interviewing indicates that such conditions reduce accuracy. Official documents generally do not note this factor. Some case files contain follow-up interviews conducted after recovery. These are intended to clarify timelines or resolve inconsistencies. In brief disappearance cases, follow-ups are often minimal. Early accounts remain central. Requests for corrections sometimes appear in supplemental reports. Family members may point out errors in published timelines or descriptions. Not all corrections are integrated into main records. Earlier versions may continue circulating. Officers occasionally note witness demeanor. Phrases such as "appeared unsure" or "could not recall clearly" appear in some reports. These observations are framed neutrally and are not emphasized in later summaries. Physical walkthroughs are used in some investigations. Parents or witnesses retrace routes and indicate key locations. These demonstrations are documented through sketches, photographs, or short descriptions. The level of detail depends on available personnel and time. Digital information increasingly supplements testimony. Phone activity, message timestamps, and location data may provide context. In many short-term cases, such data is not systematically collected. Verbal accounts remain primary sources. Family-provided photographs are incorporated into files. These images show recent appearance and clothing. Captions may indicate date and location. They support identification and public notification efforts. Qualifiers such as about, around, and I think appear frequently in original notes. These markers of uncertainty are often removed in final reports. Approximate estimates become fixed entries. Legal considerations shape documentation. Investigators avoid including speculative or emotionally charged statements. Reports emphasize observable facts. Expressions of fear or guilt are usually excluded. Community context influences testimony. In small or close-knit settings, individuals may exchange information before speaking with authorities. Shared narratives develop quickly. Official records may reflect this convergence without documenting its formation. Cultural expectations affect how supervision and movement are described. Norms differ between urban, rural, and recreational environments. Standard forms do not account for these variations. Retention policies limit preservation. Audio recordings, when made, may be deleted after statutory periods. Written summaries remain. These summaries become the primary archival record. Comparative reviews indicate that early testimonies focus on immediate circumstances. Broader patterns of behavior and environment are rarely explored unless a case extends over time. Public notices and coordinated information releases. Missing child investigations generate large volumes of public communication. These communications are designed to inform, request assistance, and manage the flow of information. They take the form of alerts, press statements, digital bulletins, and broadcast notices. Each format follows institutional guidelines and reflects coordination between agencies and media organizations. The earliest public notice is usually issued through emergency dispatch systems. In many jurisdictions, this appears as a regional alert distributed to patrol units, transportation authorities, and partner agencies. The alert contains a brief physical description, last known location, and time of disappearance. Language is standardized to ensure rapid comprehension. Law enforcement public information officers prepare formal press releases. These documents are written using approved templates. They include the child's age, clothing, physical characteristics, and circumstances of disappearance. Statements are reviewed by supervisors before release. The review process emphasizes accuracy and legal compliance. Distribution occurs through multiple channels. Press releases are emailed to newsrooms, posted on agency websites, and shared on official social media accounts. Broadcast outlets adapt the material for television and radio. Print and digital publications reproduce key sections with minor edits. Visual materials are central to public notices. Photographs supplied by families are cropped, color-adjusted, and formatted for different platforms. Image captions include basic identifiers and dates. In some cases, composite sketches are produced. These are issued only after internal approval. Alert systems such as Amber Alerts operate under specific criteria. Not all disappearances qualify. When activated, alerts interrupt mobile phones, highway signage, and broadcast programming. Activation time, message content, and geographic range are documented in agency logs. Media coordination meetings occur during extended searches. Representatives from law enforcement and major news outlets receive briefings. These sessions clarify what information may be released and what should be withheld. Notes from such meetings are sometimes included in administrative files. Information updates follow a regular schedule. Agencies issue statements at set intervals, even when no new developments occur. These updates reaffirm search efforts and restate known facts. Repetition maintains public awareness, but limits narrative variation. Language used in notices is carefully controlled. Words implying blame, speculation, or criminal intent are avoided unless confirmed. Phrases such as missing, last seen, and being sought are standard. Emotional appeals are minimized in official releases. Inconsistencies sometimes appear between early and later notices. Clothing descriptions, time estimates, and route details may change. Revised notices are issued to correct errors. Earlier versions may remain accessible in archives and online repositories. Social media introduces additional complexity. Families, volunteers, and community members share posts independently. These posts may include unverified information. Agencies monitor online activity and may issue clarifications. Records of such monitoring are rarely public. Hotlines and tip lines are established in parallel. Contact numbers appear in every release. Call volume is tracked. Summaries of tips are compiled separately and are not usually disclosed. Public notices reference these channels to encourage participation. International and interregional coordination occurs in some cases. Notices may be forwarded to neighboring jurisdictions or border agencies. Translated versions are produced when necessary. Distribution logs document these transfers. Historical records show changes in format over time. Early notices appeared as newspaper columns and radio announcements. Later decades introduced fax bulletins and television crawlers. Digital platforms now dominate dissemination. Editorial decisions shape how notices are presented. News outlets select headlines, images, and placement. These choices influence public perception. Official files do not control these elements but may contain clippings for reference. Legal counsel reviews some releases. Privacy laws and juvenile protection statutes restrict disclosure. Names of siblings, medical details, and family addresses are excluded. Redactions are documented internally. Retractions and closures are also communicated publicly. When a child is found, agencies issue confirmation statements. These notices are brief and focus on status rather than detail. Earlier alerts are formally deactivated. Archival practices affect preservation. Digital posts may be deleted. Website pages may be updated without retaining prior versions. Some agencies maintain repositories of past notices. Others rely on third-party archives. Comparative analysis shows that most notices converge on a common structure. Identification, location, contact information, and status appear in predictable order. This consistency supports rapid processing by both media and public. Public feedback influences later releases. High call volumes, misinformation trends, or media criticism may prompt adjustments. These changes are rarely visible outside internal correspondence. Training materials emphasize clarity and restraint. Officers responsible for communication are instructed to avoid dramatic framing. Notices are intended to support search operations rather than generate attention. The cumulative effect of these practices is a controlled information environment. Details move from private reports into standardized public formats. Complexity is reduced to support wide distribution. These notices become the primary public record of a disappearance. They are cited in later reporting and reviews. Internal documents recede from view. Internal reviews and procedural assessments. Completion of search and recovery operations triggers a mandatory documentation phase within most emergency response organizations. Supervisors are required to account for actions taken, resources used, and procedural compliance. This administrative stage begins shortly after field activity ends and proceeds independently of public attention or external inquiry. The primary instrument of evaluation is the after-action report. This document is prepared by supervisory personnel and incorporates material from dispatch logs, field notes, and command briefings. It presents a chronological overview of activities and summarizes decision points. Language is formal and administrative. After-action reports follow standardized templates in many jurisdictions. Sections typically include incident overview, resource deployment, coordination efforts, and outcome. Each section contains brief narrative paragraphs and tables. Individual observations are framed within institutional terminology. Drafts circulate internally before finalization. Supervisors, legal advisors, and training officers review content. Revisions address clarity, liability concerns, and consistency with policy. Marginal notes and track changes are removed in final versions. Performance metrics are central to evaluations. Response time, search coverage, personnel hours, and equipment use are calculated. These figures are compared with departmental benchmarks. Deviations are noted without extended interpretation. Decision-making processes are documented through meeting summaries. Command staff meetings held during operations are recorded in minutes or summary notes. These documents outline strategic adjustments and resource reallocations. Informal discussions are not preserved. Interagency coordination receives specific attention. Reports assess communication between police, fire departments, park services, and volunteer groups. Points of delay or confusion are identified. Recommendations emphasize improved protocols. Technology use is reviewed. Evaluators note the effectiveness of GPS tracking, mapping software, and communication systems. Equipment failures and compatibility issues are recorded. Procurement or training needs may be referenced. Training compliance is examined. Files indicate whether responders held current certifications. Deviations from training standards are listed. Corrective actions may include refresher courses or updated manuals. Community interaction is summarized. Reports mention cooperation from families and volunteers. Public information activities are reviewed for accuracy and timing. Complaints or commendations are recorded in separate annexes. Medical response procedures are evaluated. Transfer times, triage practices, and documentation accuracy are reviewed. Coordination with hospitals is assessed. These sections rely on data supplied by medical partners. Legal considerations shape report content. Language avoids personal attribution of fault. Systemic issues are emphasized over individual performance. This approach reflects risk management priorities. Some evaluations include external reviewers. In larger incidents, independent auditors or regional coordinators may examine files. Their findings are appended. These reviews focus on compliance rather than narrative reconstruction. Lessons learned sections appear in many reports. These sections outline procedural adjustments. Recommendations are phrased as policy updates rather than critiques. Implementation timelines are sometimes included. Archival handling is addressed. Reports note where materials are stored and for how long. Retention schedules are referenced. Digital backups and access restrictions are described. Public access to evaluation material is limited. After-action reports may be released in redacted form. Sensitive sections are removed. Full versions remain internal. Comparative reviews are conducted periodically. Training units analyze multiple reports to identify recurring issues. Patterns such as delayed notifications or communication bottlenecks are documented. These analyses inform strategic planning. Budgetary implications are included. Overtime costs, equipment use, and external support expenses are summarized. Financial accountability is part of institutional review. Personnel welfare is also noted. Reports may reference fatigue management, counseling resources, and shift rotation effectiveness. These entries are brief and procedural. Feedback from participating agencies is collected through questionnaires or meetings. Summaries of this feedback appear in appendices. Individual comments are anonymized. Documentation quality is assessed. Missing forms, incomplete logs, and inconsistent timestamps are identified. Recommendations emphasize improved record keeping. Long-term archiving and record accessibility. Administrative closure of a missing child case initiates a secondary process focused on storage, classification, and long-term management of documentation. Once operational activity ends and internal evaluations are completed, files are transferred from active systems into archival structures. This transition marks the point at which records move from daily use to regulated preservation. Most agencies maintain multi-tiered record systems. Active files are stored in operational databases or physical cabinets within investigative units. Semi-active files are moved to departmental storage facilities. Inactive files are transferred to centralized archives or contracted record management services. Each stage involves changes in access permissions and handling procedures. Classification begins during this transfer. Records are labeled according to incident type, jurisdiction, year, and retention category. These identifiers determine how long materials must be kept and who may consult them. Classification codes are assigned by records officers following statutory guidelines and internal policies. Digital records are migrated into long-term storage servers. These systems are designed for durability rather than speed. Files are indexed and backed up across multiple locations. Access requires authorization through credential systems. Logs record every instance of file retrieval or modification. Paper records follow separate procedures. Documents are sorted, placed in labeled folders, and boxed according to archival standards. Boxes are assigned shelf locations in climate-controlled storage rooms. Temperature and humidity levels are monitored to prevent deterioration. Regular inspections are conducted to identify damage. Hybrid cases include both digital and physical material. Photographs, maps, handwritten notes, and printed reports may coexist with electronic databases. Agencies maintain cross-reference systems linking physical containers to digital indexes. These systems are not always fully synchronized. Retention schedules govern how long materials are preserved. These schedules are established by law, administrative regulation, and institutional policy. Non-criminal missing child cases often fall under general incident report categories. Retention periods range from several years to permanent preservation, depending on jurisdiction. Some records are designated for extended retention due to historical, legal, or training value. These files may be flagged by supervisors or archivists. Flagged files are excluded from routine destruction cycles. Criteria for designation vary and are not always publicly disclosed. Destruction procedures are formalized. When retention periods expire, records officers compile lists of eligible files. Supervisors review these lists. Approval is documented. Physical documents are shredded or pulped. Digital files are overwritten or deleted using certified methods. Destruction certificates are filed. Legal holds override destruction schedules. If litigation, investigation, or public inquiry is pending, records must be preserved regardless of age. Legal departments issue hold notices. These notices are entered into record management systems. Files under hold are isolated from disposal processes. Privacy regulations influence archival handling. Records involving minors are subject to additional restrictions. Access is limited to authorized personnel. Sensitive information such as medical data, addresses, and personal identifiers is protected through redaction or encryption. Medical records associated with missing child cases are governed by separate health information laws. Hospitals and clinics archive these files independently. Law enforcement agencies typically receive only summaries. Full medical records remain within healthcare systems and follow different retention rules. Interagency files are dispersed. Police, fire departments, park services, hospitals, and volunteer organizations each retain their own documentation. No centralized repository exists in most jurisdictions. Researchers must navigate multiple systems to reconstruct complete records. Metadata management plays a central role in digital archiving. File names, creation dates, authorship fields, and access logs form part of the archival record. Errors in metadata can render files difficult to locate. Periodic audits are conducted to correct inconsistencies. Format obsolescence presents long-term challenges. Older digital files may use outdated software or storage media. Agencies periodically migrate data to new platforms. This process risks data loss or corruption. Verification protocols are applied, but failures occur. Microfilm and microfiche were widely used in earlier decades. Many older case files exist only in these formats. Specialized equipment is required to access them. Some agencies have converted microfilm to digital images. Others continue to rely on legacy systems. Indexing practices vary. Some archives maintain detailed subject indexes. Others rely solely on case numbers. Incomplete indexing limits retrieval. Records may exist but remain effectively inaccessible due to cataloging gaps. Public access procedures are governed by Freedom of Information laws. Requests are processed by designated officers. Files are reviewed for exempt material. Redactions are applied. Response timelines are regulated. Appeals mechanisms exist for denied requests. Redaction practices shape what becomes visible. Names of minors, family members, medical personnel, and witnesses are commonly removed. Addresses and precise locations may be withheld. In some cases, entire sections are blacked out. Redaction logs document these actions. Fees may be charged for retrieval and copying. Large requests can require staff hours. Agencies sometimes negotiate scope with requesters. Narrowed requests reduce processing time. Broad requests may be delayed or denied. Digital portals increasingly handle public requests. Applicants submit forms online. Tracking numbers are assigned. Status updates are automated. Despite automation, substantive review remains manual. Historical researchers encounter uneven access. Some jurisdictions release extensive material. Others provide minimal summaries. Differences reflect legal frameworks, administrative capacity, and institutional culture. Journalists rely heavily on archive notices, press releases, and redacted reports. Internal memos and raw data are rarely accessible. As a result, public narratives are built from limited sources. Academic studies use aggregated data. Individual case files are seldom available in full. Statistical databases derived from archival material replace original documents. Contextual detail is lost. Record consolidation projects attempt to standardize archives. Regional or national systems collect selected data from local agencies. These systems emphasize classification and retrieval efficiency. Original documents remain decentralized. Funding constraints affect archival quality. Storage facilities, digital infrastructure, and staff training require ongoing investment. Budget reductions lead to delayed maintenance and incomplete migration. These deficiencies accumulate over time. Disaster preparedness influences preservation. Floods, fires, and cyber incidents threaten archives. Agencies develop contingency plans. Backup sites and cloud storage mitigate risk. Not all facilities meet recommended standards. Security measures regulate internal access. User permissions are assigned by role. Investigators, supervisors, and clerks have different levels of clearance. Access logs are reviewed periodically. Unauthorized access triggers internal investigations. Legacy systems complicate management. Older databases may lack compatibility with newer platforms. Agencies maintain parallel systems. Data duplication increases storage demands and error risk. Archival staff receive specialized training. They learn classification standards, privacy law, and preservation techniques. Turnover affects institutional memory. New staff rely on manuals and databases rather than experiential knowledge. Community interest influences retention decisions. High-profile cases may receive extended preservation. Routine cases may follow standard schedules. Public pressure can alter archival treatment. Intergenerational transfer of records presents challenges. Physical archives move locations. Digital systems are replaced. Documentation of these transitions is incomplete. Some materials are misplaced or mislabeled. International cooperation introduces further complexity. Cross-border cases involve multiple legal systems. Records are shared under treaties or agreements. Copies are stored separately. Retention policies differ. Technological monitoring tracks file integrity. Checksums and validation tools detect corruption. Scheduled audits verify completeness. Not all agencies implement these systems consistently. Archival descriptions rarely capture operational context. Files are categorized by administrative criteria rather than experiential factors. The lived reality of searches and recoveries is not preserved in storage systems. Confidential appendices may accompany main files. These include internal assessments, personnel evaluations, and legal advice. Access is tightly restricted. Many are never released. Long-term storage contracts with private vendors are increasingly common. Companies manage off-site facilities and digital repositories. Oversight depends on contract terms. Migration from private vendors back to public control can be difficult. Data formats and indexing systems may differ. Transition projects require extensive reconciliation. Retention laws evolve. Legislatures amend statutes. Agencies update schedules. Older files may fall under new rules. Compliance requires periodic review. Some archives establish historical collections. Selected files are transferred to state or national archives. These collections are curated. They are intended for long-term research. Selection criteria are discretionary. Public exhibitions and educational programs sometimes use archived material. Documents are displayed in redacted form. These uses are rare and carefully controlled. Ethical considerations influence access. Balancing transparency with privacy remains a central concern. Agencies err toward restriction in cases involving minors. This limits external review. Digitization projects expand accessibility. Scanning paper files creates searchable databases. Funding and staffing limit scope. Many archives remain only partially digitized. Cross-referencing between agencies remains limited. A police archive may not link to hospital or volunteer records. Fragmentation persists despite technological advances. Scholars note that archival survival is uneven. Some decades are well preserved. Others show significant gaps. These patterns reflect policy changes, budget cycles, and administrative reforms. Long-term preservation transforms active investigations into static collections. Records become objects of management rather than tools of response. Their meaning shifts from operational to historical. Over time, archives shape institutional memory. Training programs draw on stored files. Policy revisions reference archived reports. These materials influence future practice. Public understanding is mediated by what archives release. What remains restricted or destroyed disappears from collective awareness. Archival systems thus affect historical interpretation. The accumulation of administrative decisions determines long-term visibility. Choices about storage, classification, and disposal shape what endures. These choices are procedural rather than narrative. Long-term archiving converts complex events into regulated artifacts. Personal experiences become files. Movement becomes metadata. Uncertainty becomes closed records. These systems emphasize stability, security, and compliance. They are not designed to preserve subjective detail. Their structure reflects administrative priorities. The preserved record is therefore partial. It documents actions, timelines, and outcomes. It excludes hesitation, ambiguity, and informal interaction. What survives is shaped by regulation. Through storage and restriction, cases move gradually out of public reach. Access narrows. Interpretation becomes dependent on secondary sources. Archiving is the final institutional stage of a missing child case. It completes the transition from lived event to managed record. From that point forward, information exists primarily within controlled systems. patterns of retelling, and secondary documentation. After official files are closed and stored, information about recovered children continues to circulate through secondary channels. These channels include newspapers, television programs, books, online articles, databases, and documentary compilations. Each retelling draws from a limited set of accessible materials. Over time, repetition shapes how incidents are remembered. Early secondary accounts usually appear within weeks of resolution. Journalists publish follow-up articles confirming recovery and restating initial facts. These reports rely on press releases and brief interviews. They rarely introduce new information. Language from official notices is reproduced with minimal alteration. In later years, cases are incorporated into feature articles and retrospective pieces. Editors select incidents that fit thematic categories such as wilderness survival, unusual rescues, or child safety. Selection criteria emphasize clarity and brevity. Complex or ambiguous files are less likely to be included. Book authors and researchers consult archived newspapers and publicly released reports. Access to primary records is often limited. Writers therefore depend on secondary summaries. Citations trace back to the same small group of original sources. Independent verification is uncommon. Television programs adapt cases for visual presentation. Producers condense timelines into short segments. Interviews with officials or family members are edited for length. Archival photographs and maps are reused. Scripts favor coherence over detail. Compilation websites and databases aggregate incidents from multiple regions. Entries follow standardized formats. Typical fields include name, date, location, duration, and outcome. Narrative sections are short. They repeat established wording from earlier reports. Digital platforms accelerate replication. Articles are copied, paraphrased, and reposted across sites. Minor variations appear in phrasing. Core details remain unchanged. Errors, once introduced, spread quickly and persist. Search engine indexing reinforces dominant versions. Pages with high visibility appear first in results. Users encounter repeated descriptions. Alternative accounts are less likely to surface. This process stabilizes particular narratives. Citation practices influence preservation. Writers reference prior articles rather than original files. Chains of citation form. Over time, distance from primary sources increases. Attribution becomes indirect. Editorial framing evolves. Early reports emphasize recovery. Later retellings may highlight unusual elements or brief statements made by children. These elements are isolated and foregrounded. Context is reduced. Photographs and illustrations are reused across decades. Stock images sometimes replace original photographs. Visual continuity supports narrative continuity. The absence of new imagery limits reinterpretation. Language simplification occurs gradually. Technical terms are replaced with general expressions. Procedural detail is removed. Descriptions become shorter and more accessible. Narrative templates emerge. Articles adopt similar structures: disappearance, search, discovery, statement, closure. This format allows rapid production and easy consumption. Online commentaries and forums introduce informal interpretation. Users discuss cases based on published summaries. These discussions are rarely informed by primary records. Speculation and assumption coexist with factual excerpts. Encyclopedic platforms compile entries using secondary sources. Editorial policies require verifiability. Because primary files are inaccessible, editors rely on news articles. The same limited material supports multiple reference entries. Academic literature occasionally cites recovered cases in broader studies. Researchers use them as data points. Individual detail is abstracted. Case-specific documentation is rarely examined. Archival newspapers' digitization has expanded access to early reports. Researchers can retrieve original articles more easily. However, digitized collections often lack complete runs. Gaps remain. Copyright and licensing affect reuse. Some publishers restrict access to full archives. Others allow wide reproduction. Availability shapes which sources dominate secondary literature. Time influences selection. Older cases with stable documentation are favored. Recent cases may lack sufficient public material. They are underrepresented in compilations. Regional focus varies. Some compilations emphasize national coverage. Others concentrate on specific parks or states. This affects which cases enter broader awareness. Language translation extends circulation. Articles are translated into other languages. Nuances are altered. Simplification increases. Translated versions may omit qualifying details. Correction mechanisms are weak. When inaccuracies appear in secondary sources, they are seldom corrected. Original publishers may update content. Metadata errors compound problems. Incorrect dates, locations, or spellings propagate across databases. Automated scraping reproduces these mistakes. Commercial incentives shape presentation. Websites prioritize engaging headlines. Titles emphasize unusual aspects. Subtlety is reduced. Standardized descriptions are adapted for attention. Educational materials use simplified accounts. Safety programs, textbooks, and training modules incorporate selected examples. These versions prioritize lessons over documentation. Over decades, layers of retelling accumulate. Each layer filters information further. What remains is a compact narrative stripped of procedural context. Primary records recede from view. Access barriers and time reduce consultation. Secondary sources become substitutes for archives. The cumulative effect is stabilization of limited narratives. Certain phrases and sequences become canonical. Alternative details are forgotten. Researchers studying media transmission note that repetition creates perceived reliability. Familiar wording signals authority. Readers assume accuracy based on frequency. Digital preservation ensures longevity of these patterns. Archived web pages, cached copies, and databases maintain early formulations. Revision is rare. Retelling transforms administrative records into cultural references. Incidents become examples rather than events. Documentation becomes anecdote. Institutional memory and policy influence. Accumulated documentation from missing child incidents feeds into institutional memory over extended periods. Agencies retain records not only for legal compliance, but also for reference in training, planning, and policy development. Over time, repeated exposure to similar case structures influences how organizations understand risk, response, and resolution. Training programs draw heavily on archived material. Manuals include anonymized examples that illustrate standard procedures. These examples are selected for clarity and instructional value. Complex or ambiguous cases are rarely used. The emphasis remains on demonstrating correct application of protocol rather than exploring uncertainty. In many jurisdictions, training officers review closed cases annually. They identify patterns related to response time, coordination, and resource use. These reviews inform updates to operational guidelines. Changes are incremental and framed as refinements rather than reforms. Policy language reflects this process. Terms such as best practice, standard operating procedure, and established protocol appear in revised documents. These phrases signal continuity. Adjustments are presented as alignment with experience rather than reaction to specific events. Institutional memory is reinforced through repetition. New personnel learn procedures through scenarios derived from prior incidents. The same types of situations are modeled repeatedly. Over time, these scenarios define expectations of what a missing child case looks like. Formal policy revisions often follow internal audits. Audit reports cite aggregated findings rather than individual cases. Metrics such as average search duration, alert activation time, and interagency communication frequency guide recommendations. Narrative detail is not preserved. Interagency agreements are also shaped by past experience. Memoranda of understanding outline roles and responsibilities. These documents are revised based on observed coordination challenges. Language focuses on jurisdictional clarity and information sharing. Legal departments contribute to policy influence. Reviews identify areas of liability exposure. Policies are adjusted to reduce risk. Documentation requirements are clarified. Language is tightened to avoid ambiguity. Technology adoption is influenced by institutional memory. Agencies invest in tools that address previously identified gaps. Mapping software, communication platforms, and data management systems are selected based on historical performance reviews. Budget proposals reference prior incidents. Funding requests cite documented needs, such as equipment replacement or training expansion. Historical records provide justification. The narrative remains administrative. Community outreach policies also evolve. Agencies refine how they interact with families and volunteers. Guidelines specify points of contact and information flow. These adjustments are based on prior feedback summarized in reports. Institutional memory is not static. Staff turnover affects continuity. Knowledge is transferred through documentation rather than personal recollection. In some organizations, specialized units maintain internal case libraries. These libraries include redacted reports, timelines, and summaries. Access is restricted. Use is primarily educational. National organizations and professional associations collect data from multiple jurisdictions. They publish guidance documents and model policies. These publications draw on aggregated experience rather than individual narratives. Policy influence extends to legislation in limited ways. Lawmakers reference agency reports when considering changes to alert systems or funding structures. Testimony relies on summarized outcomes. Detailed case analysis is uncommon. Judicial decisions occasionally reference procedural standards. Courts assess whether agencies followed established policy. Institutional memory embedded in manuals and training materials informs these standards. Media attention can accelerate policy review. High-profile cases prompt internal reassessment. However, changes remain procedural. Language emphasizes reinforcement of existing systems. International collaboration introduces comparative influence. Agencies exchange information through conferences and working groups. Practices observed elsewhere inform local adjustments. Documentation supports these exchanges. Institutional memory also shapes what is not questioned. Assumptions embedded in long-standing procedures persist. Alternative approaches are less likely to be explored if existing methods appear effective. Feedback loops reinforce stability. Policies generate actions. Actions generate reports. Reports confirm policies. This cycle maintains consistency. Occasionally, external reviews disrupt this cycle. Independent audits or commissions introduce new perspectives. Their recommendations may prompt broader change. Implementation remains gradual. Documentation style contributes to influence. Formal language conveys authority. Repetition across documents reinforces norms. Deviations are minimized. Training evaluations assess comprehension of policy rather than critical engagement. Success is measured by adherence. Institutional memory favors conformity. Over decades, this process produces layered guidance. Older policies are revised but not erased. Language accumulates. Manuals grow longer. Core principles remain. Institutional memory thus becomes both resource and constraint. It supports reliable response while limiting variation. Policies reflect accumulated experience filtered through administrative priorities. The influence of past cases is indirect. Individual incidents are abstracted into patterns. Patterns shape rules. Rules shape future response. What persists is a framework optimized for predictability. Flexibility is addressed through discretion clauses rather than structural change. Institutional memory operates quietly. It does not announce itself. It is visible in documents, training sessions, and routine practice. The effect is continuity across generations of personnel. Responses appear consistent despite changing contexts. Documentation underpins this stability. Limits of access and residual uncertainty. Public resolution of a missing child case is often interpreted as informational closure. A child is located, official statements are issued, and active investigation ends. From an administrative perspective, the incident is complete. From an informational perspective, substantial portions remain inaccessible, undocumented, or permanently restricted. Most public records represent only a fraction of the total material produced. Dispatch logs, press releases, and summary reports form the visible layer. Beneath this layer exist internal communications, preliminary notes, draft assessments, medical files, counseling records, and restricted correspondence. These materials are governed by privacy law, institutional policy, and legal risk management. Access barriers are structural rather than incidental. Laws protecting minors limit disclosure. Medical confidentiality statutes restrict health information. Educational privacy regulations shield school records. Together, these frameworks remove large portions of post-recovery documentation from public view. Even within law enforcement systems, access is segmented. Investigators, supervisors, legal staff, and archivists operate under different permissions. No single individual routinely reviews all materials associated with a case. Knowledge is distributed across departments. Redaction practices further narrow visibility. When files are released, identifying details, interview transcripts, and internal commentary are removed. What remains is a sanitized version focused on dates, locations, and procedural compliance. Context is minimized. Some records are never formalized. Informal conversations between responders, medical staff, and family members may influence decisions but leave no documentary trace. Verbal assurances, personal observations, and discretionary judgments are excluded from archives. Memory loss also contributes. Over time, personnel retire or transfer. Personal recollections fade. Without recorded testimony, experiential knowledge disappears. Institutional memory retains procedures, not impressions. Technological transitions introduce additional gaps. Data stored on obsolete systems may be lost during migration. Backup failures, format incompatibility, and incomplete transfers affect long-term preservation. These losses are rarely publicized. Selective preservation shapes historical understanding. Materials deemed administratively useful are retained. Others are discarded. The criteria for usefulness reflect operational priorities rather than research value. Public inquiries and investigative journalism occasionally recover suppressed material. These efforts depend on legal challenges, whistleblowers, or exceptional disclosures. Such recoveries are rare and fragmented. Statistical reporting replaces narrative in many systems. Agencies publish aggregated data on response times and outcomes. Individual variation disappears within averages. Anomalies are absorbed into general categories. Family perspectives are largely absent from official archives. Private discussions, emotional responses, and long-term reflections remain within personal domains. Unless families choose public disclosure, these experiences are not recorded. Research access is constrained. Institutional review boards, privacy offices, and legal departments impose limits. Scholars rely on partial datasets. Conclusions are based on incomplete evidence. Media representations reinforce partial knowledge. Journalists depend on accessible documents and interviews. Restricted material remains outside reporting. Public narratives reflect available sources rather than full records. Digital permanence creates asymmetry. Early press releases and initial summaries remain searchable indefinitely. Later corrections, internal clarifications, and nuanced findings may never reach public platforms. Early versions dominate. Uncertainty persists through omission rather than ambiguity. Questions are not answered because relevant data is unavailable, not because conclusions are contested. Institutional language contributes to this effect. Terms such as resolved, closed, and no further action signal finality. They describe administrative status, not informational completeness. Confidential appendices and sealed documents may exist indefinitely. Access may be restricted for decades. Some materials are never released. Their contents remain unknown outside agencies. Comparative reviews show that similar cases generate different levels of documentation depending on jurisdiction, funding, and personnel. Unevenness produces informational inequality. Some incidents are well preserved. Others leave minimal trace. Legal settlements and liability considerations further limit transparency. Agreements may include non-disclosure provisions. Certain findings may be excluded from public records. These constraints are procedural. Public trust relies on visible compliance rather than full disclosure. Agencies demonstrate adherence to protocol. Detailed explanation is not required. Oversight focuses on process, not narrative depth. The passage of time reinforces opacity. As records age, retrieval becomes more difficult. Staff familiarity declines. Storage systems change. inquiry becomes increasingly complex. Educational and training materials draw on selected examples. These examples are simplified. They emphasize operational success. Remaining uncertainties are excluded. Secondary documentation stabilizes these simplified versions. Compilations, databases, and reference works reproduce limited information. Gaps become embedded. Ethical considerations support restriction. Protecting privacy, preventing re-traumatization, and maintaining family autonomy justify limited access. These values conflict with historical completeness. The result is a layered record. A small public core is surrounded by restricted, fragmented, or absent material. Movement between layers is tightly controlled. This structure shapes long-term understanding. What can be known is defined by administrative design. Curiosity encounters procedural boundaries. Resolution therefore marks a shift rather than an end. Activity becomes archival, attention fades, information settles into managed silence. What remains visible is stability. What remains hidden is complexity. The disappearance and recovery become a closed file rather than an open account. Public knowledge aligns with institutional output. Alternative perspectives lack documentation. Interpretation is constrained by availability. Uncertainty does not imply mystery. It reflects regulated absence. Records exist within systems that prioritize protection and efficiency over completeness. Each closed case becomes part of a broader pattern. Individual detail is absorbed. Distinct experiences merge into standardized outcomes. The final stage of documentation is quiet. No announcement marks it. Files are stored. Access narrows. Inquiry slows. From that point forward, understanding depends on fragments. Press releases, summaries, and redacted reports define the boundary. These boundaries are maintained by law, policy, technology, and practice. They are durable and cumulative. Over time, the distance between event and record widens. Interpretation relies increasingly on secondary material. What survives is shaped less by what occurred than by how it was managed. Closure, in administrative terms, produces persistence of limited knowledge. The record remains stable. The experience does not. If this video caught your attention, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.